You ready?
Yep, we're ready.
You starting, Pat?
Uh-huh.
Is it
What?
taping now?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Okay.
I can edit whatever we don't want.
Oh, maybe all of it. Let's see, I was born in June the 24th, 1919 in Pleasant Grove, Utah. Lived there for...
To whom?
What?
To whom? Who were your parents?
Oh, from Raymond Christensen and Susie Bullock Christensen. We lived there for 8 years. I went to school the first and second grade in Pleasant Grove. And when I was 8 years old, my dad bought a ranch in Camas, Utah. And we moved up there, and that's where I went to school for 10 years. From the third till graduated out of high school. My dad had a 70-acre farm up there, and I used to help him on the farm and milk cows. We had about 20 cows all the time to milk, and from the time I was 8 years till I was 18, we milked about 10 cows twice a day by hand. And when I got to be about 14, my neighbors needed some help to milk cows, so I went and helped them. And I'd milk 10 over there twice a day. And my dad, he says, well, if you want to go over there and work, why, you'll have to do your work home first. So I got a little tired of milking cows, and in the summer I would work for the farmers putting up hay. So I saved up enough money when I was a junior in high school. I bought a 1930 Model A Ford, gunmetal colored gray, and it was similar to the one, exactly like the one I got now, except for color. We thought that was pretty hot stuff. I was the only kid in high school with a car, but I'd earned enough money to buy that car.
Tell them about the fishing that you used to do.
We used to have a private fishing hole down in Crooked Creek, what they call, and I used to keep the fish, the folks supplied with fish. In fact, we had fish, my mother used to can fish and sometimes salt them away, and we had fish most of the time. Sometimes in the summer, why, it'd be raining, and the guys I used to work for say, well, we'll pay you your wages, you get out and catch the fish and give us a fish. So I used to do that. I'd go on and fishing for them, and I used to catch a lot of fish out of the Weber River and Crooked Creek and also Beaver Creek. So done a lot of fishing and hunting. Used to like to hunt too, so we done a lot of those type of sports. Graduated out of South Summit High in 1937. And there, my dad, he never did like Camas. From the time we moved there, it was like a broken record, we used to tell him. All he could say was, I want to get out of here and move back to Pleasant Grove. He didn't like Camas because the winters were so cold, and the summers was nice, but the winters was awful cold. And he had a cow barn, and I used to try to get him to make an A-grade barn out of it, which we'd have to make it sanitary and spend quite a bit of making a new barn, but all he could say, I don't want to spend the money on this place, I want to move back to Pleasant Grove. So it was B-grade milk, and they made a cheese out of it. So after I graduated out of high school, I went to work at Kennecott.
Oh, hey, honey, before you get that, tell them about Reed and how you used to slide around on the ice on the road.
Oh, me and Reed both we was inseparable friends all through high school, even through grade school, all the way from grade school up to graduate out of high school. And we used to do our girl dating together, so we was real good friends, inseparable actually. And then we moved away, and he moved to Ogden in California, and we never met each other till the class reunion in '45. And but anyway, after I graduated from high school, I went to work at Kennecott as a what?
You're not telling about the fun things you did in high school.
Well, some of the things I don't
Come on,
tell
tell
about.
us. Well, tell them about sliding, taking the brakes off or something. Or
Well, in high school, we used to have fun with our Model A. They had mechanical brakes, and we'd take one of the brake lines off the front, undo it, and we'd get going down Main Street in Camas and push them brakes, and we could spin like a top. We'd
Nice.
bet
In the
how many
snow.
times we could make a spin and where it would stop. So we got pretty used to driving on ice, and we had a lot of fun that way.
And tell them about the dances you used to go to, and you used to go with Rita. You went with Rita more.
Yeah, we used to go to the dances in Camas and down the Wanship, and I met Rita Moore. Went with her for a few years.
I never knew that.
Yeah, for about a year, and then we was going pretty steady. And then your mother moved up from Irma Hawes, moved up on a ranch up to Stewart Ranch up in Woodland, and we started dating. And when I moved out of Camas, why she moved to Salt Lake, so we kept on dating after she moved to Salt Lake. So
Now, how far did you live from her at that time?
he was from up in I was 14 miles from where I lived in Marion up to Stewart Ranch.
So you had to have a car to quarter then.
Well, I had to have a car. One of the few in town had a car. And of course,
And tell how cold they were on those
the
winter
car
nights
was
and
had side curtains on, but it had a manifold heater, which wasn't much more than a warm breath of air. It didn't heat very good. In the wintertime, we'd put safety pins in the side curtains to keep some of the draft out, but it was
Did
pretty
you have a
cold up
rumble
there in
seat
winter.
in the car?
What?
Did you have a rumble seat?
It had a rumble seat, just like the one we got now, yeah. So we had a lot of fun with that car. And after about a year later, the car got a little cold, so I went and traded in on a one just like it, only it was a closed-in with glass coupe, Model A, 1930.
So when you went on a date with Mom, what did you do?
We had the convertible in the Model A.
Okay. Did you go to dances?
Well, we used to go to dances. Yeah, we used to go to dances lots.
School dances or
School dances. Yeah, we went to dances, school dances, and
how did you double date in that one-seated car?
well, we double date. My dad had a four-door, and we'd use that. My dad had a closed-in four-door 30 Model A. So most of the date, when we was dating, we'd borrow his car.
How did you meet Irma? Were you in the same
Met her,
school? Or?
No, Irma was in a sophomore, and I was a senior. And she came up there and went to school in 1937. And I was a senior. That's when I graduated. So we did go to a lot of
She
dances.
didn't stay up there to graduate then.
Yes, I graduated from
No,
there.
she didn't.
She went to East High. She moved to Salt Lake and went to East High for 2 years to graduate.
But you continued to date in those 2
We
years?
continued to date, yeah.
So when Mom moved up to Woodland, was you the first one to catch her eye?
Well, she was going with some other guys, and I had a couple of steady girlfriends too.
Okay.
And yeah, they were. Yeah, well, I better not brag.
We said it's okay.
Yeah, but we used to have a lot of good times together.
You always enjoyed dancing, didn't you?
We liked to dance. Yeah, we liked to dance.
You
and
still do with Jerry?
Your mother was a good dancer, and Irma was a good dancer, and we enjoyed dancing. We used to go quite a bit with friends. There was a lot of friends we used to go dancing with all the time. But anyway, I went to Bingham and got a job on the track up there, and I worked there for about a little over a year on the track, and then I went oiling on the shovel, and the shovel runner I was working with, he didn't like his oiler, and the oiler used to spell him off running. So he didn't like him, and he liked me, so he broke me in on the shovel, and I used to run those as a craneman for First, and we used to load those ore cars in Bingham for a couple of years while I was working on the shovels. And I broke in on the whirlies too. For about 3 years I worked as a pitman, but I was used to spell off the runner because I broke in on running the shovel. And I used to work 3 or 4 hours, and he'd run 3 or 4 hours, so it made it not so monotonous. So as long as the company they was getting the cars loaded out, they didn't bother too much at that time. And me and the one shovel operator, we used to have what they call the old standard shovels. We load 109 100-ton railroad cars in an 8-hour period, and that record stood up there at Kennecott for even when I left. That was still the most railroad cars had been loaded in that 8-hour period. And the shovel runners I worked around, which was 3 or 4 different ones, I worked for different ones, they said I was a natural born shovel runner. They said I should stay with that. They said I should stay with it. Anyway, I decided I'd like to go braking more, so I got changed and went to braking on an engine. And we used to haul ore down to the pit, or off out of the pit up to the Copperton. We'd haul the ore and haul a lot of waste out to the dump. And I broke in on the engine, and the guy, the night shift, I used to get, I guess in them days I was money hungry, so I'd double a lot and stay over and work 2 shifts. And the superintendent
What was the pay wage?
Pay wage at that time was about, well, at that time it was up to about $8 about $4 an hour, I guess.
Well, that's good.
It was pretty good. Well, at first, when I first started, it
An
was
hour
only
a day.
a day. When I first started, it was only $3.80 a day when I was on the track. But then it went from there up to, about a year later, went up to $8. Well, when I got to the advancement, it went up to $8. But anyway, I was a brakeman for a couple of years, and then I got broke on running engine. I used to trade off with the engineer and run the engine. But well, as a braking, I used to. They knew I was broke in on the running the shovel, so a couple of the shovel runners I used to work with, we'd haul the ore away. They'd trade jobs, and they'd be the brakeman, and I'd be the shovel runner, and I'd work about 3 or 4 hours loading the trains up, and they'd take the trains to the dump. And I know one time I was out on the railroad car, right in the end of a railroad car, and we was going 35 miles an hour, and that train jumped the track, what we called ditched, and went over the embankment. The embankment was on the side level. There's only about 50 foot wide on them levels. But anyway, it jumped the track and rolled down the hill, and it was instinct to kick that brake, what we call big hole it, let the air out, set the brake on the train. But that train car traveled 1 car length and went over the hill, and I'd kicked the air and jumped off, and there was an investigation on it, and they come up there and they said they couldn't figure out how come that brakeman didn't get killed. That he'd kicked that air and set the brakes and jumped to the bank.
My goodness.
And we would tell about my wrestling. There was a professional wrestler, and I'd get in his engine, the car would pull up behind, and we'd have to wait till his would be loaded out, so every time I'd get there, he'd want to wrestle with me. So I could handle him pretty good. I was strong when I was like that. And he this one time got his foot behind the brake staff, emergency brake staff, thought he'd get some leverage on me. Anyway, I threw him down, and when we went down, it broke his leg. He had his leg propped behind that brake staff, broke his leg.
What did you do to break it?
Well, he got his foot behind the brake staff, thought he'd get some leverage on me so he could throw me down. Anyway, he got behind, and when we went down, I went down on top of him and broke his leg, but nobody ever knew it but us. We didn't dare tell. We knew we'd get fired for horseplay.
You forgot to brag about your math in school.
And
See where our kids get their math skills
when
from.
another one up there, he thought he was tough too, and his name was Art Lipsy. And he said, I can lick anybody in Bingham. And he used to ride with me he moved to American Fork, and he was always bragging how tough he was. And so one night he grabbed me, and I just threw him all over. He could, thought he was pretty tough, but he never bragged after that. We used to ride to work, and the guys in the car, he'd start bragging how tough he was. And he says, there's a guy in this car that you can't whip. So he'd shut right up because he knew he couldn't. Anyway, we had, I did always have a lot of strength that way. But we had a lot of good times. I worked up there till 1945. And, well, the superintendent liked me pretty good. I was working at night, so he put me on running the engine, and I run the engine, locomotive engine, for 2 years, night shift. You'd work night shift till you had enough seniority to go days. So I was running the last 2 years. I was running engine, locomotive engineer, and my brakeman, he'd been worked there 2 years longer, but he was mad because I was ahead of him. They'd move from a brakeman up to an engineer is what they'd do. Well, let's see, in 1940, went in the service in 1945 in April. I stayed there for 6 months.
You're not married yet.
Well, I'm married.
You haven't told us
The
that.
baby
I guess
was
better
there.
back up then.
How long did you work for Kennecott before you married Mom?
I was working there for about a year and a half, and then we got married, and we lived in Salt Lake for till 1941 for 2 years, and I used to haul passengers from Salt Lake to Bingham. I'd bought a brand new 1940 Chevrolet, and paid $905. I remember it was the best one they made at that time. And I used to haul passengers from there up to Bingham, and I was getting deferred because I worked for, they call it Kennecott, they need the copper for the shells in the Army, so they used to get me deferred because I was working as a railroad brakeman and as an engineer too, so I worked there, went in the service in 1945, but I was only in the service 6 months and the war ended.
How many children did you have at the time?
I had 3 children.
Tell them about your wedding.
Well, I'll back up. Our wedding we had in the Jensen home in Salt Lake, which was quite a.
And what's the address?
Well, it was on 27 South and Highland Drive. It was quite a famous place at that time for a wedding. You paid quite a bit, but actually I'd saved up quite a bit of money, but I paid for the wedding, and I had a dance band come. And my uncles used to say, well, when are you going to get married again? So it's the most fun we ever had. You had the best band we'd ever heard, which I've been around. I know we're good bands.
You married in the Salt Lake Temple.
I'm married in the Salt Lake Temple, yes.
This was the reception you're referring
And the reception we had at the Jensen home, which was in 27 South and Highland Drive.
Did you go on a honeymoon?
We went on a honeymoon to California.
What part?
And we traveled around California, Los Angeles, went up to San Francisco and back home. And
Where were you living at that time?
we lived in Salt Lake.
What part? Do you know
We lived on at that time we lived on, I had an apartment. First when I lived there, I lived up on 9th East and 1st South in a kind of a,
Hi, how are you?
what do you call them? Apartment where we used to have our
Boarding house?
boarding house affair, and we lived there. So, and then after we got married, we bought a rented apartment down on 8th East and
I don't know.
344 South.
I don't know if we have it or not.
We lived.
He's had a long time.
And then when was Roy born?
Roy was born on
Oh,
December the
I don't know where it is.
1st.
21st. Yeah. And then we, where was I? And then I moved to, I bought some land in Pleasant Grove where the car lot is now. It was a vacant piece of ground, a wheat patch, no buildings of any kind on it. So I bought that and we moved a 2-room house. It was pre-built in Salt Lake, and we moved that down on that place in Pleasant Grove, on that 6 acres where the car lot is. And we've added on that house 2 different times. Started out with a 2-bedroom, and then we made a 2-bedroom out of that 2-room house, and then we made added another kitchen on it, and another bedroom. We made a 4-bedroom house out of it. We done that in 1955. No. Yeah, we done that in 1952. So we lived there, and in 1952, I started up the car business. There was nothing there. We had a farm there. We used to raise a lot of onions and cabbage and celery and potatoes and sugar beets, right where the car lot stands now. And I bought another 10-acre field down below the car lot there. That I bought it in 1941. And I bought a 7-acre piece down the Sam White Lane in about 1946.
What made you decide to start the car lot and quit Kennecott?
Well, when I was running the car lot, I had to work all three shifts. There was graveyard, swing shift, and day shift. And I hated graveyard. Every time Irma would come to wake me up to go to work, why I said, boy, there's got to be an easier way to make a living. I hate this graveyard because the problem was I'd go to graveyard and then I'd get home at 8 in the morning and then I could think of all these things I had to do. So I'd go out and work all day, and I'd go to work. I wouldn't get to bed that night till about 8 or 9 o'clock, so I'd only get a couple hours sleep, so I was pretty not feeling very good. I was running that farm there by the house, which had 6.5 acres, and then I bought another, from Ed Ball, I bought another 14 acres that joined me on the west and on the south, so I had 20 acres right there. Had quite a big farm, raised a lot of corn and pumpkins. We had lots of pumpkins and sweet corn and onions and sugar beets, so I was working a job and running a farm, and then
And everybody got awful hard to live with.
yeah,
You
they
didn't
were
get
kind of
only 2
ornery.
hours
People in my
sleep.
family would get on her when I'd only get a couple hours sleep. They'd get on her with me too. Because it went on for years. I didn't only get about 3 or 4 hours sleep. And then in 1948, I built a duplex. I moved a barracks up from La Paz down by Delta. I moved it up there and
Topaz.
made a Topaz, yeah. Built a duplex out of it and rented that. And then in 1948, I rented that from 48 on. And in 49, I bought a barracks up to Kearns, and it was 100-foot long, so I cut it in 2, moved it down, made another apartment there, a duplex, and the other half I made a chicken coop out of it, down and back, yeah.
So all of those didn't come from Topaz,
Just the one.
just the one.
And I tore another one down to Topaz, and we used the lumber out of it to build these others. We tore a great big barracks down there. I used to, all my days off when I was down to, at that time I was working Kennecott, I was working Geneva, and all my days off we'd go down and take 2 days. On 2 days off we'd tear a bunch of boards off, and we tore in panels, and we'd haul it home on a big 2-ton truck I had, flatbed. So we'd haul big loads home, and we'd sell the lumber. During the war, you could sell any kind of lumber you had for pretty good price. So we sold a lot of the lumber and used a lot of it in our duplexes. So, but I built a house up there. I built and sold in 1950. I built a house and sold it to Melvin Marshall with 3 acres of land. And in 1951, I built a house over in American Fork, across from the high school, and kept that rented till about 3 years ago. So.
It was farther than that.
What?
It was long ago than that.
It's been, yeah.
But I don't remember when, but I know it's more than 3.
Yeah. Shut it off a minute and let's think. Well, it's so many
Stop a
things I
minute.
get
Get a drink.
backtracking.
Yeah,
All right.
that's not
Yeah,
right.
Ron was born, better backtrack there. Ron was born in October the 24th, 1941. And we still lived there in that little 2-room house. And then in 1944, Richard was born, October the 2nd. in
Oh, really?
1944.
Did you know?
And Mara was born December the 23rd in 1945. And when I was in the service, I had 3 kids, Mara and Richard and Ron and Roy. And when I was after I'd had my training, they was gonna ship us overseas. So the guys I'd trained with, there was 2 Christensen twins and another brother that I used to buddy with when I was in the Army down in Amarillo, Texas. And we had shipping orders to go overseas, and they had what they call supernumeraries. And one of the Christensens got sick, and out of the whole company there was about 3,000 or 4,000 men getting shipped out. So one of the Christians had asked if one of them went, they all went. So one of them got sick and went to the hospital, and they was gonna, when they come down to me, they didn't know whether I was one of the Christians that got mixed up. So they pulled all me out of there, and they're the guys that kept me from going overseas at that time, because they said we'll pull all the Christians then. And if somebody else went, they had some extra, what they call supernumeraries. They was the one who went in the service. But when I went in the service, I was real good in math, and I had an IQ test of 136 out of a possible 150. They wanted me to go to OCS college, but I had to sign up for 2 years, and I didn't want to stay in the Army, so it wasn't for me. So I was second high in the whole company of about 2,000 with my math, and they wanted me a candidate for an officer is what they wanted. Anyway, I refused them, and I looked like towards the end of the war that I'd get out anyway, so I didn't go for that.
Tell them about your round with your sergeant.
Well, when I first went to the sergeant, I was kind of cocky, I guess, and I didn't like to be in there. And there's a big black guy as our sergeant, and I know we was marching and that, and he says, they jumping, and I wasn't jumping just like he wanted me to, and I got a little mad at him, and I says, let's me and you meet downtown tonight after we get off the training and see who jumps after me after I get through with you. From then on, he rewrote me. They said they couldn't make you do anything, but they could sure make you wish you had it. Well, I learned my lesson.
Did he whip you?
Well, no, he didn't. He just
Did you have
made
a
it.
fight with him?
No, I didn't fight with him. He's a big black sergeant. Maybe you would have whipped me, but I'd have tried. I was cocky, and he. But anyway, he really made it tough on me when I was in training. And when I was in training, there was a couple of the guys in our platoon that the guys that they knew I was kind of strong. In another group, they told him, they says, Chris can take any 2 of yous in that whole barracks. So 2 of them tackled me, and I remember I threw one down on top of one and held them both down. But anyway, they didn't have no chance with me at that time. But anyway, another time I had shipping orders to go overseas, and they passed a law just about 2 or 3 days before that I was supposed to be shipped over. If you had 36 or more points, you wouldn't ship overseas. And at that time, I had 3 kids, and they was worth 12 points apiece, where they counted. So I didn't get shipped overseas. So I guess it just didn't mean to me if you go overseas. The group that I trained with went over for the Army of Occupation of Japan, and the atom bomb they dropped, and they told us later that we was the group that was going to be the invasion of Japan. So I guess I think the atom bomb had a lot to do with saving maybe my life, because there was going to be, they figured they'd have 1 million casualties if they ever invaded Japan, because they was a lot stronger on their home front they had anticipated. Their intelligence has told them so. I guess the atom bomb, I always thought, really saved me. But anyway, after the war, I had a chance to go down to Geneva to work, and I worked there as a railroad conductor for 8 years. And I decided to start the car lot up, and after I'd been there about 6 years, and thought there might be an easy way to make a living, so I started it up, and I worked about another year and a half after. I'd lay off all my graveyards I'd have Irma call in and say I was sick. That's the only excuse you could have, to not go to work. So it went on for about a year, and finally the boss called me in. He said, "Well, I know you've got another job you're going." He says, "You better quit and keep in good standing." So he says, "We can't have you laying off all the time on graveyard." So I said, "Well, I'm ready to quit anyway." So I quit and went selling cars. And
Meanwhile, you had Betty and Jay.
I had Betty. Betty was born in 1948 in November the 12th, yeah. And then and Jay was born December the 27th, 1950.
28.
28th, yeah. Yeah, 28. Jay March. Yeah, December the 28th in 1951.
Did Mom have any trouble with any of the pregnancies?
Yeah, it held me out. She had phlebitis of the leg after she'd had Richard, and she had to sit around the house on one leg. So I did get deferred for about 2 or 3 months for that reason. They passed a law in about the latter part of the year of 1944 that if you was 26 years old and there was no other deferments. So I had 3 kids when I was drafted, and your mother was kind of handicapped for about 4 months, so I was able to stay around there, and I worked the job, and then I helped her what I could. So she was laid up for with phlebitis till I went in the service. But she got better then. She had a lot of illnesses. She had a lot of illnesses.
Now, I've been told that I lived with Merle and Ruth for a month or 2. Is that true?
You went up there and stayed for a while, yeah.
For that reason?
Just an infant
No, I don't think it was that reason. It could have been about that time. You might have done. I know. I kind of forgot about that. You did stay up there for a while.
Is that when he's just an infant baby?
Well, he was an infant baby, yeah. He was about a year old then.
Well, I thought.
I think they was her pregnancy with Marla. She needed some help, and Rich went up to stay with them when she was pregnant with Marla. And then maybe right after she had Marla.
Yeah, I guess you stayed up there for a while, and yeah. And then let's see, I started that car lot in 1952, and I've had a dealer license ever since.
Tell them about putting pieces of cars together to make one.
Well, during the war, I'd go around and look for cars, and sometimes if I find 2 alike, I'd make one out of 2. And any car that in them days during the war, that if you get it to run, you could sell it at a good price. And I'd take the other one and make trailers. So I made a lot of 2-wheel trailers. And I was making one, besides my job, I was putting out about a trailer a week. And we could sell them as fast as we could get them on the road, because a lot of people use them in place with pickup truck. So done quite a bit of that during the war, doing different things, always scheming around doing more than one job.
Those trailers, did you have to weld them, or did you just...
I bolted them. They used to drill them and bolt them. I didn't weld them because I didn't know how to weld. But I'd usually, some of the things I'd take out and have welded. If it did need a welding job, I'd take it someplace and get it welded up. But they're mostly wood boxes and that, and wood frames.
Where did you learn your skills that way? Are you kind of self-taught, or Ralph
Self-taught.
Christensen taught you?
My dad actually wasn't really too much of a mechanic, but I remember overhauling a car when I was when I was about 22 years old. I took a car down and overhauled it, and I just came natural to me to do a car. But my dad, he wasn't very good mechanic, or he didn't know much about cars, but I was overhauling cars when I was during the war even, and after the war, why I used to do a lot of work myself on the mechanics. When I wasn't selling them, I'd be out working on them.
Now, I understand in high school you were in FFA and had some honors in there.
Yeah, in high school, me and a guy by the name of Pearson, what's his first name? John Ivan Andrews and myself was in a stock judging contest down the state fair, and we won the contest for stock judging. That was of all kinds of animals, sheep and horses and cows and everything, and we went for 5 western states, and we got my mother clipped a clipping out of the paper, so it was quite an honor, and we got a gold medal for it too.
You won in the category of horses too?
The horses too, all types of animals.
You had horses? I didn't know that.
They had horses in the stock judging too, all types of animals is what it was.
So in FFA, what did you raise?
In FFA, I raised sheep. I used to raise sheep in Camas, and when I got out of high school, I still had about 10 sheep that I'd raised. So,
But you didn't win in the horse category, then? Just in the sheep?
well, no, used to win. I won a lot of grand champion in the sheep, for sheep and rams, and we used to sell them for quite a big price, because I had the grand champion lamb for a couple of years, a ram, and we'd sell them for rams, and we got pretty good prices out of them, and helped me get a start with money too, and buying a car.
Tell me a little bit about your brothers and sisters.
Yeah, Dean was 5 years younger than me, and Shirlene was 16 years younger, and Margaret was 4 years older.
Do you have any memories you remember of them as a kid?
Yeah, me and Margaret used to milk the cows, and Dean was younger, but he came along later and he milked the cows. So we lived on that ranch up in Camas for 10 years, till we moved back to Pleasant Grove. My dad, he was always wanting to get back to Pleasant Grove, but about the first year after he moved up to Camas, he was unhappy, and we used to tell him like a broken record, all he could say. Like, we'd tell him, do you want to do something about the place, fix it up? Oh, I want to get back to Pleasant Grove. So he finally got back there after 10 years.
He moved to the 300 West. Is that their first home in Pleasant
No,
Grove?
they moved on the highway there, across from the old ring store. They lived there from about 37 till about 1953, I think. They lived there quite a while.
Tell them about the ice cream and the dinners that your friends would come up every Sunday, or they'd come up there, or you go down.
Well, when we lived in Camas, well, my folks had a lot of relatives and friends in Pleasant Grove, so one week they'd come up there and we'd make ice cream and have all kinds of fun with their cousins. And the next week we'd get down to Pleasant Grove and do about the same thing there.
Did you have a dinner, or just?
We'd always have a dinner and a visit. Yeah, they'd always have good dinners.
Tell them about the Vaughn and your little roughneck cousins, and the fights you had with the Peterson boys down here in Pleasant Grove. Was it Peterson's?
Well, there's up in Camas, yeah. When they'd be up there, Vaughn and Tom would come up there, and we'd have gang fights. We'd get down there. Well, Peterson's, there was a bunch of cousins, and I have to go down there to get the cows and bring them a pat, and they'd beat me up. So as soon as Vaughn and Tom would come, and Glenn, why, we'd get on. They was really fighters. They could lick anybody in Pleasant Grove. You can ask anybody the old time.
They're your cousins.
Yes. And
So this
and they would get out and have a gang
area?
fight, and we'd really beat up the Petersons, but there was about 6 or 8 of them. They was all cousins.
Up in Marion?
in Marion. So the next night I'd have to get down, and I could lick any one of them that was my age. And after we'd get down, I'd have to get down and get the cows the next night, and then they'd be waiting for me to beat me up. There'd be two of them to jump me then. So it took a while to learn the lessons. I'd get my cousins, they could lick any one of them. But I know when we was in grade school, there was a couple of Jensens. Well, there was a Jensen family moving the ward. There was a triplets that was a year younger than me, and a Jake that was a year older. And we'd go out every recess and wrestle when we was about in the 7th and 8th grade. And they says, well, Earl can whip any two of you Jensens. So Jake took me on, and one of the other seniors, and one of the other triplets, and I remember flipping, threw Jake down. I flipped one of the triplets over him and broke his leg. So we after that they wouldn't let us wrestle anymore in recess.
So how old
So then
were
a bunch
you?
of, well, we was about 14, and there's a bunch of kids from Boulderville moved over there, and they was my best friends. They was a year older than me, but they was my best friend. They used to, after we got older, got dating and that, they said, well, you had us buffalo scared to death. Said you'd say boo, and they'd run, but they was outweighed me by 50 pounds. They was a grade ahead of me, but I had a buffalo, I guess.
It works.
It worked, but anyway.
So what did you and Reed do in school? That was
Me and
fun?
Reed used to have a lot of fun together.
His dad was the sheriff. Tell me
Reed
about
was
that.
Dad was the sheriff, and we knew pretty well where he was, which end of the county he was. So we knew about where we could get ahead, what we could get away with, speed and whatever, because his dad was the county sheriff.
Well, what did you do for fun?
Oh, I got what kids do, I guess, drive cars and we'd go on dates together, of course.
Did they have school parties and dances?
We had a lot of school parties and dances, yeah. We had a lot of good times that way.
Cars seem to play a big part in your life. You
Always liked
enjoy
cars.
being in cars,
Always
you enjoy
liked cars.
traveling.
Tell
Yeah.
them about your class reunion when you and Reed had to talk. And
Well,
and
yeah.
Reed asked how many had been arrested by his dad, and half the audience raised their hands.
Well, me and Reed, after having a class reunion, they asked us to talk. So Reed asked the audience, or the guys, how many of them had been arrested and put in jail by his dad. About 3/4 of the audience had, but I never had.
And
So we used to have a lot of good times together.
Richard talks about his memories of your trips to Yellowstone and packing. How many people into one little car?
Yeah, we used to, from 1945 to 65, there was only 1 or 2 years that we wasn't on Fishing Bridge on the opening day of fishing, which was July the 1st. And we used to go up there and rent a boat and get downstream about a mile, and most of the time, and there's been times we could have filled that boat full. And we used to have a little private hole that was about the same area, and we'd fish off the bank. And I remember this one time, I went over I dropped the kids, Richard and Roy and Ron, off, and I went over to get a cabin up by Fishing Bridge to rent a cabin. And when I got back about 45 minutes later, why, they says, we've caught our limits of fish, you can't fish. They had their limits. Remember that, Richard?
Yeah, we were up there waiting for you.
They was there waiting for us. They had their limits of fish, and so I had to wait another day. We had to go eat some fish so we could catch some more.
Well, follow what Richard was talking about, your brothers and sisters. Some of the things that you did when you were kids.
Well, this one time we was up to Yellowstone, and I had a 1952 Mercury. And Arnold Carter's family was up there with us, and we had 13 in that Mercury, and we rode around. It was just a 2-door, but most of the kids was young then, but we had 13 of us in that car. We drove around the park.
Is that when Roy threw up?
Yeah, Roy got,
That a little Volkswagen?
yeah, we was crammed in there.
Oh, God.
I remember we stopped, there's a kid hitchhiking, we stopped and he says, we'd let you have a ride, but we don't know where to put you. He looked in there.
Sardines in
Yeah,
there.
we're sardines. Remember
Poor
that,
kids was on the
Richard?
bottom layer in the back seat, couldn't see a thing.
They even left Richard home one time up in an apple tree watching everybody leave, and they had so many people in the car they didn't even notice there was one missing.
There's a pear tree.
Oh, pear tree.
Yeah.
When did they miss you and come back?
We got
Not
down,
until they got to Murray.
not that far. We got down the road to American Fork. We decided Richard wasn't with us, so we went back and got him. He was up at my dad's place.
Tell them about Jess Moore's kids.
The one time we went to Yellowstone, we was with Jess and Rita Moore, and Richard, and we stayed overnight and camped. We had a trailer and they had a camper. And Richard and Norman and Grant was throwing rocks at each other, and Grant threw a rock at Richard, and Richard ducked, and the rock hit Norman in the tooth, wasn't it?
Yes.
Broke his tooth off, so we had to go to the dentist to get his tooth fixed. It was hurting him. So Grant had the radio with him, and we got going down the road. We all loaded in the cars. We was all mixed groups. Some of their families in there, and some of our family was in theirs.
This rock thing happened on the way to
And we was up
Yellowstone?
at Idaho at
St.
Ashton,
St. Anthony was
St. Anthony, I guess, and we all loaded in the cars, took off. We got down the road about 30 miles, and the kid started talking. He says, well, let's get the radio playing. They had a portable radio, and one says, well, who had the radio last? And he said, well, Grant had it last. And they got looking, where is Grant? And Grant wasn't in either car. We got, so we had to go back. I had turned around, went back, and there Grant was on the curb. We had the radio playing, but the radio saved him. The kids
You
was all
left
trying to
more
play
than
the
one
radio, and they forgot who had it last, and they said Grant had it, and so it was a funny thing. We went back and got him.
What do you remember about Grandpa and Grandma Christensen's accident?
Yeah, Grandpa. Yeah, they had a wreck. My dad had a wreck on the point of the mountain. His car slid sideways. It was. I think it was New Year's Eve, and he was coming south, and the car slid sideways, and the car hit and mashed my mother's side of the car, and even pinned her in the car. They had a heck of a time to prying her out. Her foot got caught in where the car was bent. Anyway, they took her to the hospital, and she was in there for quite a while. She was in pretty bad shape.
And the roads were icy.
The roads was icy. Anyway, she was in there, and after she got out, not very long, she had a stroke. And from then on, she was kind of crippled. She was kind of on her left side, and she had dragged that leg, and I remember had a little ball she used to squeeze, trying to get some action back in that arm. And then when she was at that time, she was only 56 years old, and a couple of years later, she practically overnight, she turned gray-white hair. And then she was quite sick after that for quite a while. She was in bed a lot of the time because she was unable to maneuver, and she died in 1967.
Now, Grandpa wasn't hurt very badly?
He didn't. He was on the other side of the car. He didn't get hurt he was driving. It didn't hurt him very much. Shook him up, and Charlene was in the car, but she didn't get hurt very much either.
What was that story you tell about them getting in an accident and one of them having some soda pop?
Yeah, they was crossing, one time they was crossing, Charlene was about 16 years old, and they was crossing, going out to see Margaret at Grass Valley. And my mother was driving, my dad was on a graveyard shift in the back, so he was laying down in the back. And out across the salt flats, something happened, my mother went to sleep or something, they ran off the road, run into the salt flats, and the car laid on its side, and they had some strawberry soda pop, and it was running down my dad's back, and he looked at that and it looked like red. He says, "Susie, you've killed me. You've killed me. I'm dying." And he said, "You killed me." But after they got out of the car and he was all right. He didn't get hurt very bad, but he thought he was dying for sure. All that soda water was running all over him.
I love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of trips to Margaret's, I guess you can tell us about the one that everybody got sick on, from gas fumes, I guess?
Well, we went down to Jay's funeral. This would have been, I guess the year would have been, what, it's been about 5 years ago, about 1991. Anyway, we went to Jay's funeral, and on the way back, we had this Lincoln, and it had an exhaust leak in the back. The pipe had rusted off or broke off, and the fumes come out of that through the trunk and in the bank, and we was driving along, and pretty soon Charlene really got happy and got drowsy, and June kind of got sick too, and
Shireen got upset. She was
Shirley really got sick. It was probably more stronger on her side, and Jerry was getting sick, and we didn't know what was happening. And we stopped the car, and Shirlene had almost passed out. And so we rolled the windows down. We wasn't sure what was happening right now for a little while, and we rolled the windows down and decided it was them fumes that had done it. So we drove all the way home with the windows down, but the pipe had broken, let the fumes up through the trunk and into the car.
Now, tell us a little bit about your travels around the world. How many times have you?
Well, in
when did you start this?
let's see, I guess Ron and Jay grew up in the car business, so in the wintertime I was usually able to take trips. So most of my trips was taken in the wintertime, and I remember the first trip I went around the world was in 1968, and I had a guy, travel agent, plan out that trip, and when I got to go to get the trip, he'd bring it up, he said, he'd goofed it up a lot, it was all messed up, and I said, well, just get me the ticket around the world and all that, I'll make my own way. So I just got around the world ticket, and as long as I was progressing western direction, I could go, and so I went to Japan and Hong Kong and Singapore and the Philippines and Thailand and India. Went down and saw the Taj Mahal, I remember it, from New Delhi. And then we went over at that time to Israel and seen the Holy Lands and up through Germany, and I even had a Eurail pass, and we had a 15-day Eurail pass, which you could see 13 of the Western European countries there. So then we came on home, but I've been around the world once that way, and then when me and Jerry got married, we went around the world in 1978, I believe it was. About the same kind of trip.
79, I think, was the year Michelle was born.
79 maybe. But I've been around the world that way, and they call it around the world going to Japan, or to Australia. So we've been to Australia 3 times. So actually I've been around the world, which they call that, actually 5 times. Been to Europe 10, 11 times. Been to South America. Been to Russia 1 time, and been to China 1 time.
South Africa.
Been to South Africa. Been to Hawaii at least 25 times or more.
Alaska, 10
at
10
least
times
at least 15 or 20 times. So,
Do you have a favorite?
any one place would be Hawaii, I guess. We liked Hawaii. Yeah. But we like to travel and done a lot of it.
Why don't you tell a little bit about Irma's illnesses?
What?
Tell a little bit about Irma's illnesses, all her operations and her bad health.
Irma had a lot of bad.
How she helped you in the office and.
Well, when I was in the car, why Irma done the books and used to get the license plates and do the office work, and I done the selling, and Ron and Jay come along and they done the mechanic and the selling too. So yeah, we worked out a pretty good operation. We was quite successful in the car business. And then I bought some ranches in 1970. I bought a ranch down in Mills, 2,080 acres, and we had that till it got sold in 1997. And then we bought some ranches out in Roosevelt. We bought, in 1970, we bought 4 ranches out in Roosevelt. So we used to run them, and lately we've been retired and have other people run them.
Tell us a little bit about Mom's illnesses.
Yeah, Irma had a lot of illnesses. She had rheumatic fever when she was, I think, in 2nd grade in school, and she was out of school most of the time that year. So she was really held back 1 year of that year. She had to do the 2nd grade over, and then she had her appendix out, and then she had.
When?
She had she was in high school when she had her appendix out. And then she had a gallbladder taken out in, about 1955. And then she had hyperglycemia for several years, which was low blood sugar, and I'm sure that helped, give her bad health.
When did that start?
She got that way back in about 1960, I guess. He was bothering her quite a bit, and then she had a heart operation in, I think, in about 1969. That time there wasn't many people had heart operations. They were just starting to do that. She had 3 bypasses, and she was real sick with that. She was in a hospital for a couple of weeks with that. Had quite a time with it. And then she had, in 1977, she had her hyperglycemia, they said, kind of caused part of her heart, her liver not to function right, so, and her pancreas. She had it operated on in February of 1977, and at that time the doctor said her liver would be infected too, but he said they didn't look at it until after they had kind of an autopsy, and when she died in August of 1977, they came and said, we got to either open her up and see if we can fix whatever the ailment. They kept saying that she didn't have cancer, but so they said either we got to take a chance and open her up and see what her problem is, or she's going to die. There's no chance. I said, yeah, that's the only chance there is, and they says yes. So they did open her up, and she at that time she was in a coma, and they said she was full of cancer. So they said there's nothing we could do.
She had a hysterectomy right after Jay was born.
She had a hysterectomy right after Jay was born.
That wasn't anything to do with cancer?
No, I don't think so.
She had a lot of problems.
She had a lot of problems, yeah.
And then you married Jerry?
Yeah, in 1977, I hadn't been going out much, but some friends come by we used to go dancing with, and they said, well, you don't have to dance, you can go up and listen to music. You like to listen to music, you just come and visit. And it was Earl Privet and Idell Privet and Marv and Bessie Coons, and they kept saying, oh, come and go with us and just visit anyway. So we used to go up to the terrace to visit, and first thing you know, a friend I knew Eddie Butterfield, and he knew Irma, because he used to dance with her and being single, so he introduced us to us. He told me to dance one night. He said, "I got a girl that you ought to meet," and so he introduced us and
To Jerry.
to Jerry. So we dated about 6 weeks, and then we got married.
Not a long courtship.
Not a long courtship.
Now, where were you married?
We married in the Salt Lake Temple. We had a wedding breakfast at the Hotel Utah after the wedding, and then we went to Hawaii on a honeymoon.
And how old were you then, both of you?
I was 58 and she was 50. Well, she was 51, I guess.
Just,
Yeah, it was December of '77. Yeah.
just turned. And we stopped at Las Vegas on the way.
Stopped at Las Vegas and
We
seen
saw the
some.
Mills brothers.
Yeah.
Remembers that one. What can you tell us any stories about Grandpa Bullock that you were talking about?
Yeah. My mother's father was Joseph Bullock, and Joseph Bullock was a son of Thomas Bullock, who was a scribe for Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. And he came across the plain with Brigham Young, and I guess he'd done a lot of work, a lot of writing, and has written a lot of books about the church and the pioneers. And he must have been in pretty good standing with Brigham Young when they divided up the property, which a lot of them got 10 acres, which would be a square city block. And Thomas Bullock ended up with the block just south of the temple. So he must have been in pretty good standing with Brigham Young at that time. So that makes my mother's father was one of his sons. He had 3 wives, and it was one of his sons. I mean, one of his, yeah. So it makes him a great-grandfather of mine.
Okay. Any special spiritual experiences that you could think of personally, or something you'd like to recount of anything you've heard from your grandparents?
Well, I've had a lot of spiritual experiences. I've seen a lot of things happen, and I've seen them in a dream, and in a few weeks later, or months, that would happen. I've seen a lot of things happen before that ever did happen. Several things that I've seen that I felt quite spiritual about, that I've seen them in that dream, and then things actually happened a few months later.
Anything in particular you'd like to share?
Well, I know my place in Pleasant Grove, where I have the car lot, I seen it before I ever moved down there. I could see it in a kind of a vision or a dream affair.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had a dream of Jerry. Before I met her, I knew I'd seen her, in this dream. And it was in this dream, and then a while after, I could see her just as plain as could be. And before I had actually met her. So I guess some of these things is kind of spiritual, I guess.
Yeah.
What was Grandpa Haas doing in Woodland?
Yeah, Irma's folks lived in Provo, and they moved up to Woodland and had them on a ranch in about 1937, and that's where I met Irma. She went to school at Camas. She was a sophomore, I was a senior, and they went up there and run that storage ranch for Hewlett's, their name was at the time. So they only ran that for about 1 year.
Well, they moved up before 37 because you graduated in 37.
I moved up in 36 then, I guess, the year before.
Joe appears like he's a big man. Was he a strong individual?
Yeah, Joe was a strong individual, yeah. Joe ran the ranch. Was it Joe and Irvin and Barrett done the milking, and had quite a few cows milked. They ran the ranch.
How high did the snow get up there?
snow would get real high up there around that area. That was up the canyon, and I've seen it 3 and 4 feet high. And I've seen it in Marion. Well, the snow would come in the fall about October and wouldn't leave till spring about April, and it would be over the fences. You wouldn't be able to see the fences out in the fields for the pasture, and that it would snow over them fences.
You like to hunt. What have you ever done? Got any good hunting
I
experience?
used to do it every year. We couldn't pay me enough not to hunt. I used to enjoy hunting deer, and we used to hunt elk every year for many years. We used to get our elk, and used to get a deer about every year.
Where did you go and who did you go with?
We used to go out and hunt out around Flaming Gorge Dam for years. We used to go out there and hunt deer and hunt elk.
Who with?
Well, I went with Norm Stott and Ron and Richard and Roy. They used to go out with us when they was younger. We used to always never miss hunting.
Any more questions? Anything else you want to add, Earl?
Maybe you better shut it off and think of some more.
Let her think of something else.